All ladies and gents, this is his year, Pompey, 56 to 52 BCE, by the channel Historia Civilis. I guess it's Pompey's time to become, I guess, the leader holding the fasces, apparently. So yeah. So, one by one, the entire Triumvirate is going to be holding the fasces, right? In the previous time, it was Caesar. Now it's Pompey, right? It's soon after this, I guess soon Crassus is going to do that. Who the hell knows? But yeah. Let's do this one. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. Check out the reaction, date this link in the description. Check out the Consul, place the link cards, and yeah, let's watch it.
When we last left the city of Rome, it was falling headlong into anarchy. The radical senator Clodius had transformed himself into a man of the people, and through the use of street gangs, had disrupted public life in the city. Another senator, a conservative named Milo, had responded by raising street gangs of his own. Public life had slowly returned to normal, but at the cost of violence on the streets and political uncertainty. Milo, the conservative,
concept of police as we know is today in our culture was not a thing then, I guess. Which, I feel like, how does that work? If you are going to hold a senate and create this kind of government type of thing, are you supposed to, secure it without some kind of security as in police, right? Things like this would happen. People like Clodius would just, create some gang and try to strong arm people. In that response, Milo's like, I'm gonna go create a gang too, but that's weird. Why is there no such thing as police? Whenever somebody creates something like a senate, some type of government where people are leaders and things, right? First thing they will think like, okay, who's gonna enforce this, right? What if people suddenly say, screw that, I don't agree with that, and just, rebel like how Clodius does it?
Looked to the courts to bring an end to the violence. He brought a case against Clodius, accusing him of inciting violence. Everybody knew that Clodius was guilty, but he was able to bribe and threaten his way to a not guilty verdict. As a big ol' middle finger to Milo, Clodius then brought an identical case against him. Everybody knew that Milo was guilty too, but that didn't stop the Senate from running to his defense. At the trial, as Pompey was speaking on Milo's behalf, Clodius turned to his supporters in the crowd, and together they drowned out Pompey with an obnoxious chant. Clodius would shout, "Who's starving the people to death?" And the crowd would answer, "Pompey." They were referencing the fact that Pompey had been put in charge of Rome's grain supply.
Yeah.
Then Clodius would shout, "Who wants to campaign in the east?" And the crowd would answer, "Pompey." There were rumblings that the Senate was going to pick somebody to lead an army to Egypt, and Pompey was definitely interested in the job, so that one was true. Then Clodius would shout, "Who should go instead?" And the crowd would answer, "Crassus." Crassus? Pompey's ally? What did he have to do with this?
Ooh, shit. Yeah, there was a rumor, right? That Crassus is basically, helping, Claudius doing all these things while he's opposing Pompey, right? There's some kind of rumor like that. Ah, damn.
There had always been unsubstantiated rumors that Crassus was secretly funding Clodius's street violence, and this seemed to confirm that there was some sort of arrangement between the two men. The chants soon died away, and Clodius's supporters changed tactics, spitting at Pompey. Before too long, this caused a fight, mostly because it's bad manners. In the struggle that followed, Pompey was pulled down off the speaking platform. He escaped injured. The trial was called off. After the brawl...
See, that's what I'm talking about. Even in the court, right, they can just start hitting each other. It's like, nobody can do shit since there is no, police or anything.
Crassus started to make a series of public speeches, arguing that the Senate should put him, and not Pompey, in charge of the yet-to-be-formalized expedition to the east. Pompey's worst fears were confirmed. The two men were coordinating. This was dangerous. Pompey privately confessed to Cicero that he feared that Crassus would send assassins after him. When it was time for candidates to declare themselves for next year's consulship, the conservatives...
That's it. Triumvirate is done. It's already broken, right? Because Pompey and Crassus is already a massive wall between them now.
Put forward Cato's brother-in-law, a man named Domitus. If elected, he pledged to recall Caesar from Gaul and take over his command. It was in this context that Caesar summoned Pompey and Crassus to come and meet with him at what we now call the Conference of Luca. Pompey and Crassus were at each other's throats, and Caesar's command was in jeopardy. The secret alliance between these three men, the Triumvirate, was splintering. Caesar's political survival depended on Domitus going down in defeat. This is when Caesar suggested that Pompey and Crassus should run against Dominus on a joint ticket. If they won, Pompey and Crassus would have the power to extend Caesar's governorship and secure prestigious governorships for themselves. The three men agreed. As we know, Pompey would get Spain and Crassus would get Syria. The two men returned to Rome, with their alliance renewed. Around this time, Caesar sent a message to Clodius to negotiate a side deal. If Clodius would agree to throw his support behind Pompey and Crassus this year, the Triumvirate would agree to support his older brother's bid for consul next year. Clodius agreed. This was an ingenious bit of politicking on Caesar's part. It was spring now, and the elections were scheduled for the summer.
Damn, that is some... Caesar is badass, right? That is some next level shit. He saw that Triumvirate is falling apart, so he basically convinced Crassus and Pompey, both of them. And then Clodius was a proper enemy of Pompey, but he also, used his politics to make sure that Clodius publicly acknowledged Pompey and Crassus to make sure that they just, don't kill each other basically in the end. So all the squabbling that was basically hurting Caesar, because these are Caesar's allies that are squabbling, and that's bad for Caesar. Less power for him. He basically made sure that nobody is just, fighting now.
Pompey and Crassus immediately declared their candidacies and started campaigning. But they needed more time, so Clodius summoned his street gangs and did everything he could to disrupt public business. It worked, and the elections were postponed for the sake of public safety. But Clodius's tactics didn't make him any friends. At one point, when the Senate was scheduled to meet, a bunch of his...
Okay, I don't understand this. How is Senate not going... Okay, Clodius is the reason why elections are postponed. Clodius constantly does violence that hurts this Senate and this, entire Rome. And he just sits there with them and, argues things. How does they not say that, okay, basically, let's put the guy on trial and everybody basically, speak against it or something. There must be some kind of rule to kick him out of Senate, right? If he just point blank does this shit.
His fellow senators physically blocked Clodius from entering the building. Clodius promised that if they didn't let him in, he'd have the Senate house burned down. Yikes.
Damn.
Summer turned to autumn and then winter, and still no elections. When the snows came in Gaul, Caesar allowed his men to travel to Rome as private citizens to vote. And so, late in the year, thousands of off-duty soldiers showed up in the city. And then, coincidentally, the street violence stopped. Elections were scheduled for January.
Okay, I get it. It's, Clodius is working for Caesar, so of course it's gonna stop. But even if he wasn't, these are real soldiers that are coming here. Clodius would piss his pants, basically, if you try to go against them.
On the last day of the year, Rome's two consuls stepped down, and there was nobody there to replace them. On the day of the election, before dawn, a group of conservatives, led by Cato and Domitus, their candidate for consul, showed up at the voting grounds. They wanted to be there early, to make sure that there was no funny business. But there was funny business. A bunch of Pompey and Crassus's supporters were already there, armed. They attacked the conservatives, killing some and driving the rest away. Apparently, Cato was wounded while defending Domitus. After the sun rose, Caesar's soldiers and Clodius's gang members came forward to cast their votes. Pompey and Crassus won their elections easily, surprising nobody. Since this election was taking place in January, the two men assumed office immediately. When elections happened, they were supposed to be overseen by consuls. This led to this weird scenario, where Pompey and Crassus were immediately responsible for overseeing the election that they had just participated in. The elections for praetor happened next, and this year Cato was a candidate. As Cato was in the process of winning his election, Pompey arbitrarily dissolved the assembly, citing bad omens. Then, after his armed thugs made their rounds, he started up the voting again. This time, weirdly, a bunch of people switched their votes, and Cato did not win.
Okay, what is this shit? I mean, this is a pretend thing, right? Hold this government, Senate, basically voting and shit. If people can basically just strong arm everybody, threaten everybody, and kill people literally there without any consequences, what's the point of all this voting and shit? Stronger men are becoming the leader by, fighting and killing everybody. This is all pretend shit. I mean, obviously, Caesar is the one who did this shit, right? Caesar and Pompey and Crassus, Triumvirate, they all started this shit and playing, chess basically with all this political moves and shit. They orchestrated everything. But still, this is effed up. I guess Caesar from the start was emperor type of mentality, king type of thing, right? He was from the start like that, but he couldn't just, say, oh, I'm Caesar, so I'm an emperor now. So he started to play around with Senate and got his way anyway, like an emperor would do anyway. He got his governorship of 3 places, took his army, raided places just like an emperor would do, right? And he's just playing everybody in the Senate to get his way by doing his political moves and getting his way anywhere, just like an emperor would. So even though he's not an emperor from the start, his whole life, right, his whole thing from the day one could be summed up as him being an emperor because he was acting like that anyway.
It was obvious to everybody what Pompey had done, and many in the crowd were upset. Then, they elected the aediles. Pompey began picking and choosing which elections were valid and which were not. Coincidentally, his allies got in, and everybody else had their results thrown out. This was too much for people to handle.
Yeah.
Pompey had gone mad with power.
Seriously.
There was some pushing and shoving in the election pens. Both factions had secretly brought weapons, and things got deadly pretty quickly. At the end of the day, Pompey returned home victorious, but covered in blood. When his pregnant wife saw him, she fainted, and would later have a miscarriage.
Whoa!
His wife, by the way, was Caesar's daughter, Julia.
Oh yeah.
The marriage had been arranged years earlier to cement Caesar and Pompey's alliance through the Triumvirate. Once the dust had settled, Pompey and Crassus had an ally in the Senate introduce legislation giving 5-year governorships to Pompey and Crassus, and a 5-year extension to Caesar. As agreed, Pompey would get Spain, Crassus would get Syria, and Caesar would stay in Gaul. But these weren't normal governorships. The legislation also gave the governors authority to unilaterally declare war, without consulting the Senate. This ruffled a lot of feathers, but eventually the legislation passed, and their obligation to the Triumvirate was fulfilled. And then our sources get a little patchy. But in the fall, we know that the elections were held for the year 54 BCE. Pompey and Crassus supported Clodius's older brother for consul, just as they had promised. He won his election, but so did Domitus, Cato's conservative brother-in-law that ran last year. In the winter, Crassus departed for Syria. He would not return, but we'll get to that another day. Pompey decided to ignore his previous agreement with Caesar and Crassus and stay in Rome instead of going to Spain. His reasoning was this: let Crassus win victories in Syria. Let Caesar win victories in Gaul. Pompey's military career was already unparalleled. They called him the next Alexander the Great. He had nothing left to prove. He would stay in Rome, free from Caesar.
Yeah, he wasn't next Alexander the Great, because barely anybody knows that name, Pompey. Anybody who, basically knows any Roman history, and anybody who sees Julius Caesar's life, then they learn who Pompey is. So obviously he wasn't Alexander the Great.
And Crassus's influence, and establish himself as the most powerful man in the city. His subordinates would govern Spain in his absence. He ended the year by throwing expensive public games. Apparently the big draw was elephant versus elephant fights, which people seemed to like. The games went over pretty well, and Pompey's popularity began to rise. And then, in 54 BCE, his wife unexpectedly died in childbirth.
Whoa.
Pompey was genuinely heartbroken, and spent a good portion of the year in mourning. Caesar was off campaigning in Britain that summer, and wouldn't learn about his daughter's death until he returned to the Gallic coast in the fall. Now, the legal bond between Pompey and Caesar was severed, and the Triumvirate was back to being as fragile as ever.
Yeah, seriously.
When the elections for that year rolled around, there was a massive corruption scandal. All of the candidates for consul were caught bribing the consuls who would be overseeing their election. Last year, Pompey had shown everybody how easy it was to pick winners and losers, and everybody was interested in replicating his success.
Pompey wasn't even trying to be more, cunning and, more political. He just point blank refused the result. That was just effed up.
But fortunately, they were all caught before any of this could happen. Everybody was disqualified, and the election was pushed back 6 months so that new candidates could be found. With violence on the streets and corrupt elections, Romans were feeling like the political system was becoming more and more unstable. People began to whisper that Pompey should step up and re-establish order. The word dictator started to be thrown around. Before too long, brand new candidates were campaigning for consul. One of the candidates was Milo, the conservative senator and leader of half of the city's street gangs.
Yeah.
To Clodius, the leader of the other half of the city's street gangs, this was unacceptable. Clodius decided that if Milo was running, there would be no election. He took to the streets, and Rome descended into anarchy.
That's just fucked
Clodius's gangs and Milo's gangs clashed all over the city. There were deaths every day, and corpses were just left lying openly on the streets. Public business ground to a halt.
I don't understand this. I mean, look, I get it. This is, I guess 2000 years ago, right? But still, if you form some kind of a civilization, if you form some kind of a senate, right? Some kind of a democracy or something, you need some force to enforce it, right? You need a force like police or something. Otherwise, people like this, Clodius, Milo, just street gangs killing people left and right if they don't get their way. I mean, what's the point of Senate after that? How hard is for the Senate to basically put some bill there that let's create some kind of a inner police force, right? Use the soldiers to train them and put them on guard there, right?
This continued for months, and the elections kept on being pushed back. When January 1st rolled around, there had been no elections, which meant that, again, there were no new consuls there to assume office. One day in late January, Milo was leaving Rome on business, and just happened to meet Clodius returning to the city on the same road. Each man was flanked by armed bodyguards. The groups almost passed in peace, but two gladiators working for Milo couldn't keep their mouths shut, and started taunting Clodius's men. Fighting broke out spontaneously. In the confusion, Clodius was hit in the shoulder with a javelin. Clodius's men tried to rush him into a building, but Milo's men
I guess javelin grazed the shoulder, right? It can't just completely hit it, because javelin is big ass thing, right? It would have dislocated his shoulder or something if it directly hit it. It must have grazed it. Oh, wait a second.
overpowered them. Clodius was killed, and his body was just left on the road. Eventually, a traveler recognized Clodius's body and had it sent to Rome. When it got to Rome, news spread of Clodius's death. An angry mob gathered. They took his body and marched toward the Forum. They had intended to hold a funeral in the Forum, but instead, the mob stormed the Senate House. They took tables, chairs, benches, and anything else that would burn, and piled it in the center of the Senate chamber. Clodius's body was laid atop the makeshift pyre, and the wood was ignited. In death, Clodius fulfilled his promise. His funeral pyre burned the Senate House down. Rome's senators were horrified by this. Rome had been ungovernable for months, but if an angry mob could burn down the Senate, an angry mob could overthrow the government. The whispering intensified. Dictator. The people wanted Pompey to restore order.
Yeah.
Everybody was now taking the threat of the mob seriously, but the conservatives in the Senate had an understandable aversion to dictators. So they struck a compromise. Pompey would be allowed to rule as sole consul in the year 52. This was super duper illegal. First, there had to be a 10-year gap between consulships. That was the law. Pompey had served only 3 years earlier. Second, there was no election. The Senate just decided that Pompey would be the next consul. Since when was that a thing? But nevertheless, in the year 52 BCE, Pompey assumed power.
Damn. So technically, Pompey was the proper first dictator, right? Then Julius Caesar's like, yeah, I'm going to show you how it's done. And got across the Rubicon, and there you go. Roman Empire begins.
Had their consul in place, Bibulus, maybe you've heard of him, put forward some legislation. The Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the final act. This special piece of legislation...
Wait a minute, I didn't hear the name.
When they had their consul in place, Bibulus, maybe you've heard of him, the final act. This special piece of legislation gave the consuls, in this case just Pompey, unrestricted power to defend the Republic. It was the Roman equivalent to martial law.
Yeah.
The bill passed without much debate. Pompey immediately raised an army and had it enter the city. Just like that, Rome was under military occupation. Legionaries patrolled the streets and fought the streets.
Hold up there. First of all, I thought no active military can enter Rome, right? There was some law like that. Because I'm pretty sure when, Caesar, marches to Rome, that was the biggest issue. Like, how can Caesar just marches with an army inside the Rome? But they already did that. Pompey already did that. I mean, I guess when they need it, it's okay, right? So they can break the rules if they need it, but nobody else can do it, apparently.
Street gangs whenever they were found. Eventually, with soldiers on every street corner, people began to go about their daily lives again. As an olive branch, Pompey had...
Everybody's just, gang members, everybody, yeah, we the man, we the badass. They see suddenly legionaries and every just, proper soldiers coming out, fuck.
Milo arrested for Clodius's murder. Milo was found guilty and was exiled from Rome. The army patrolled the streets for about a month. Peace was restored, and Pompey was the most powerful man in Rome. This is exactly what he wanted. Finally, Pompey had decided that the crisis had passed, and that it was time to relinquish his extra-legal authority. Somewhere in this period, Pompey remarried. He invited his new father-in-law, a leading conservative, to serve with him as consul for the remainder of the year. Again, no election was held. They were just making it up as they went along.
Ooh, Caesar's not going to like that.
Together, Pompey and his father-in-law passed a string of conservative reforms, such as a prohibition on candidates standing for office in absentia. This was an indirect attack on Caesar of all people, since it would force him to give up his command early and get dragged into court over his illegal actions during his term as consul.
That's just fucked up.
Pompey and Caesar's alliance was broken. The Triumvirate was dead. Pompey achieved his dream of becoming the most powerful man in Rome by openly abandoning Caesar's reform faction and transforming himself into the champion of the conservative cause.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, he's the most powerful man because he's in Rome. He has some politicians behind him, right? People see him as powerful. But let's not forget, Caesar probably has the biggest army because he has army of 3 states, right? Let's not forget that. That's why Caesar's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna march inside the Rome now. Oh, that's it. I guess the next video is the Caesar crosses the Rubicon. I don't know, playlist on, so I don't know. No, wait a minute. Oh, this is the next video probably. Okay. Damn. Okay, so this is why Caesar's gonna, march to Rome basically. So, Pompey just basically got drunk with power there. Like, Julia died, so he's like, why do I care about Caesar now? And already I did everything Caesar wanted. I also extended his governorship. I can do whatever the hell I want. But then he took a jab at Caesar with the last reform, right? To force Caesar. I mean, I get it, him being the great military mind of the past, next Alexander the Great, he was really high in power and he didn't fear anybody. But especially guys like that, right? Guys like that should think first, like, who should I mess with and who should I not, right? The Triumvirate was the whole Caesar's idea. Caesar was basically, giving orders how to work, right? And convincing people and playing chess with everybody and politically, right? He was doing everything. Then Pompey thought that, okay, Caesar a bit too much, let's not cross him, right? Let's not back down, but at least let's not cross him. Because with the last reform, he literally crossed him, right? Caesar will be pissed because of that. Yeah. Alright people, that was his year, Pompey, 56 to 52 BC by the channel Historia Civilis. If you like my reacts, don't forget to like and subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. Check out the reacts, there's a link in the description. Check out the cards for placing the cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.